Previously on The Winged Unicorn. So Caroline9116 asks, what's a movie that everyone seems to like but you just can't bring yourself to enjoy it? After careful consideration, I have finally gotten my answer. A movie that everybody else seems to like and I personally not so much is Rio. Specifically the second one. So it comes to my attention that apparently you guys actually want to hear my in-detail thoughts about Rio 2. And considering the topic of last video, I think y'all deserve a more fun video. So today I shall deliver. We are going to be talking about Rio 2 and its biggest problem as to what is holding it back. That is the relationship between Blue and Jewel. Hello everypony, it's the Winged Unicorn and I have flown back with a proper regular review. And this video is apparently something that you guys have been wanting me to cover for almost a year now. Dang, my Q&A was that long ago. Huh. Anyway, for context, which was kinda already given at the beginning of the video, ever since I said that Rio 2 was the movie that I felt is a movie that people typically like but I personally can't agree. And now that I look back at that video, I hate to disappoint you all, but I must admit, at the time when I said that, it had been a while since I saw Rio 2. Weirdly enough, I surprisingly remember more from the first Rio than I do Rio 2. So in order to make this review, I decided to rewatch both movies to really refresh my memory. Because originally, the reason I didn't like this movie was because of the character of Jewel, which is Blue's significant other, or at least later becomes his significant other, and his wife in the second movie. I thought she was fine in the first movie. The first movie I thought was fine for the most part in general, but I remember really, and I mean really, disliking her in the second movie because I thought she was really dismissive of Blue's feelings. And it really put a sour taste in my mouth, and overall, it just really ruined the experience for me for Rio 2. However, now that I'm making this review, I decided to go into Rio with a more open mind and willing to hear out to why I thought Blue was treated super unfairly, while also taking Jewel's feelings into account. So without further ado, let's dive into Rio and let's see if it really is as bad as I originally thought. Let us start with the first movie since that's the movie that we're introduced to the characters that we know. The first Rio follows a blue macaw named Blue. He had been captured from his home from a jungle in Rio as a baby bird, and he is soon found by a young Linda, his owner, throughout the rest of these two movies. And she raises him as her pet. Few years later, a man named Julio comes over to Linda's library and says that Blue is the last male of his kind, and that he suggests Linda to bring him to Rio to meet this female blue macaw to hopefully save the species. We are here introduced to Jewel, and she wants to escape the Research Foundation, and she is a very hostile person to Blue upon meeting him, especially after finding out he's a pet and he would rather be with humans as opposed to his own kind. And especially after she finds out he can't fly. So eventually they escape, and the rest of the movie they try to unchain themselves after being captured by these burglar people for a bit. On the way, the two of them slowly but surely start to fall in love with each other. Blue gets a spark to fly after the kiss they share, and they live as free birds while also staying in touch with Linda. While also, Jewel learns that maybe humans aren't so bad, after getting taken care of by Tulio, who is one of the few humans who are willing to care and treat birds like her. Okay, let's break it down. Let's start with the things that stood out to me in this first movie. First of all, the animation. I know I sound like a broken record when I say I really love pretty animation, but that's because it's true. Animation should be celebrated, and this movie admittedly is no exception. The animators clearly did their research on Brazilian culture, from the landscape of Rio, the carnivals, even the people within it, and the music sequences are when they truly push the use of vibrant colors, especially for the opening scene. Speaking of which, it is another thing that I like about this movie. I remember being obsessed with the I Wanna Party scene, and it still holds up. It's catchy, the vocals are awesome, especially Jewel's part. And like I said, the animation is awesome, which made the visuals look amazing at parts. The opening song is great too. The love song on the train ride was also great. Nico overall has really good vocals. Truth be told, I actually like both Nico and Pedro and their songs, even though I personally like the music more in the second movie, which absolutely still holds up. I must give the first movie credit because I did genuinely like the songs in this movie. Now that I talked about the thing I did like, let's talk about Blue and Jewel as characters. Let's start with Blue. The beginning of the first movie, we see how he was once a normal wild bird, but that didn't last. Because immediately after his introduction, all the birds around him are captured by humans right before his eyes. All this happens while he is just a newborn bird, and right afterwards he himself gets captured. So it's clear he faced his own trauma at such a young age. The forest is a dangerous place, and so he was never taught how to handle the danger. Granted, this danger that I'm referring to was carried out by humans, but Blue couldn't see that, which explains why he has no problem with humans and can't see how evil they can truly be. And due to him being raised by Linda, who is a really sweet person, he always had an undying trust of humans. Linda was all he's ever known. So he never learned how to fly, how to protect himself if ever put in the wild, or even that he has his own species. So yeah, totally get where Blue is coming from. Now let's go to Jewel. From her introduction, she is immediately suspicious of Blue. This could suggest that it has been some time since she had seen another bird, especially not one from her own kind. So yeah, I feel it is pretty reasonable to be even a little suspicious of Blue, especially since she had been captured by humans, even more especially learning that Blue actually was raised by one of them, and even more when Blue forces himself onto her. I know I could kill you where you stand. Okay, might as well bring up that this moment was not entirely Blue's fault. Not only did he never interact with any bird of his species, but also he got some bad advice from Pedro and Nico earlier. But also, again, I don't blame Jewel here either, cause, well, duh, consent man, consent. And also, from Jewel's perspective, she doesn't know that Blue is a creepy weirdo or not, rather than just being socially dumb at this point of his life. And also, he was sent there to specifically mate with Jewel according to Tulio and even Linda when she came around to the idea. So even though I don't entirely blame Blue here, considering the circumstances of course, it's obvious Jewel's feelings were not taken into account at all. Well, I mean, she's a bird and humans can't really understand her, but to us, the audience, obviously these birds are somewhat anthropomorphized to us to put ourselves in their shoes, or I guess feet. Anyway, also this line,
yeah, well, because of them, I've lost everything. You can't trust them.
Jewel obviously had her trauma with humans, trauma that will be further highlighted later on. So let's skip ahead a bit. After them starting to get along, starting to like each other, and breaking out of their chains, they have their argument. And after hearing it again, I feel like both were definitely in the wrong. However, one is a little bit more so than the other. Let me play this first part of the argument to show where Blue went wrong.
Look, Jewel, I can't spend my life walking around following you wherever you're going.
So clearly Blue is acting out on his own insecurities of not knowing how to fly, and Jewel can sense that, which is why she lashes out back.
Hey, it's not my fault you can't fly.
Earlier on, however, it's clear that she was going to say that she actually wanted Blue to stay or at least visit, because I feel like she was also going to at least confess to Blue that maybe she does have some possible feelings towards him.
You'll be off to the rainforest? I'll be back with Linda, just like we planned.
I guess I thought maybe...
What, that you'd come to Minnesota? Great, I guess I'll knit you a scarf.
No, that's not what I meant.
So I feel like Blue is definitely more wrong by pushing her away, but I also feel that bringing up Blue's inability to fly was kind of unneeded, but I get why she was upset by Blue's comment. After that, Blue goes on to say some insensitive things about samba, which is like the national dance and music of Brazil.
I said it. Every song sounds exactly the same. Tico taco ya ya ya. Tico taco ya ya ya. Ugh. I'm Tico Taco out of here.
Fine. See you around, Ted.
So I guess it was like kind of culturally insensitive of him to say, and saying that he just doesn't belong and that this place isn't for him, which in general just pushes everybody away, including Jewel. So clearly Jewel's feelings were hurt with Blue saying all this, possibly blaming everybody around him and saying that he doesn't want to stay in Brazil. So definitely after looking at this, they definitely had some rocky moments here and there. But in the end, Blue came back for Jewel, and Jewel was willing to stay with Blue on the plane due to his inability to fly. The two of them definitely learned how to correct their mistakes and understand each other in the end, and it was Blue's dedication to Jewel that ultimately made her fall for him. Yeah, I'll admit their progression to love was kind of quick, but it all kind of makes sense considering what they went through with each other, and it was their love that made Blue have the courage to fly successfully. So overall, while having their fair share of flaws, I say it's a solid progression to their relationship, at least in this first movie. Alright, so now it is the section you've all been waiting for. Rio 2, and what I felt went wrong, and see if I still stand by that opinion. So first off, let's quickly talk about all the good things in this movie. So, like I said, the soundtrack slaps. Admittedly, the opening song was like one of my favorite things growing up, and it still gives me goosebumps to this day. Other good songs in this soundtrack include Beautiful Creatures, It's a Jungle Out There, and the finishing song. Admittedly, while I don't like Nigel as a villain, and I especially really don't like that he's back in this movie, I at least have to give credit to where it's due. This little frog called Gabby, while I did think was kind of annoying as a kid, I actually kind of appreciate her now just because I feel like she balances out Nigel, because like I said, I don't really like Nigel, so at least Gabby brings some comedy to the table with her simpery over Nigel. I don't know, I just thought those moments were funny. The animation's also pretty great, and if I'm correct, I feel like it's gotten a little bit better since the first movie. I don't know, to me it looks a little bit more vibrant. Oh, and I guess Jules and Blue's kids are actually pretty cute at some scenes. Alright, now that we get all that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the main characters, Jewel and Blue. Specifically Jewel, but like I said, we will be hearing her out. Near the start of the movie, Jewel is out in the wild finding some nuts for her kids. Meanwhile, Blue is inside a house cooking pancakes for the kids. You know, like a human. As a result, Jewel is upset by this. Jewel is a wild bird and would like to teach her kids how to crack a nut and how to partake in wildlife in general. So I do understand where she is coming from, although I found it interesting that she said they talked about this. So that means that this is not the first time Blue has acted human. So I would like to believe that there was a time where the two tried to understand each other in this situation. They likely made a compromise when it comes to this topic, but clearly the two of them are still from two different worlds. A few seconds later, when the bird family watches the news, they find out that there are other blue macaws, and Jewel's relief of hearing this honestly makes me more sympathetic towards her. I could definitely see that she has felt super alone for the past few years, especially after a traumatic event, which we will be going into later. After convincing Blue to go to Rio, he is nervous, and rightfully so, because like, the Amazon is a dangerous place, obviously, especially for a domesticated animal like him. He literally brings a fanny pack, a self-defense mechanism for humans, and a freaking GPS. The dude is not ready. Also, the message of happy wife, happy life, this I feel is mostly good advice. I feel it is important to understand your wife's feelings and prioritize her feelings, but it's also important to not forget about yourself. Blue is clearly scared to go to the Amazon and has tried to adjust for the sake of his wife and her family. So the dude definitely tries, but gets himself embarrassed or hurt or exhausted after he does. Again, this point will be further explained later. Fast forward a bit, the characters make it to the Amazon. So we come to the scene where Jewel and her dad reunite. She says that loggers came to her old home, her forest was set on fire, and she and her father were separated. We can also assume, based on how we don't see her mother, she could have lost her mother too during this fire. Plus, that combined with her being held in a confined cage in a research facility, she definitely has been through some stuff. We don't know exactly what happened to her in the research facility, but Julio definitely seems like a nice guy, and facilities like to generally try to help endangered species. But it's obvious that Jules still felt trapped and alone, so it was no life for her, for any animal actually. And when she says, "I was alone, but Blue found me," I will admit I felt that. Yeah, they did have a rocky start, but it's this scene that made me feel that, yes, Jewel definitely does care for Blue and is eternally grateful for him to be a part of her life. I suppose that's why she grew to love him for that. Even though we see her dad being really unfair throughout the movie, the part where he thanks Blue for uniting his daughter back to him again was also pretty sweet. Also, I don't see the part where he says to Blue to call him sir after he calls him Pop Pop, and how people interpret that as him being a jerk. I just think it's a classic dad thing. This part I don't really look deep into it because I'm pretty sure any dad would do that. So this part with Jules' trauma will be further explained later in the video. Let's bring up something else that I felt pretty strongly about. Her relationship with Roberto. For context, Roberto was introduced as an attractive bird who gets all of the ladybird swooning. Not even an exaggeration. That is exactly what is happening in the literal second he's introduced. And he and Jewel were apparently childhood besties. So I'm going to be really careful as I word this, because I'm not saying that girls cannot have friendships with guys, even if they have a significant other. As long as they all agree to keep their distance and boundaries in check, they should be fine. Obviously, I understand that. With that being said, I feel that both Roberto and Jewel should have done a better job keeping that boundary. They both call each other nicknames, her father and Roberto being very cool with each other. Like, I'm pretty sure that if the dad had his way, he would have liked it if Jewel and Roberto ended up together. Also, a few seconds later after he is introduced, when it is time for the Beautiful Creatures song, freaking banger by the way, he asks Blue, "You don't mind if I borrow her for a minute, do you?" This is right after the two first meet and finds out that Blue is Jewel's significant other. They proceed to dance together, and Roberto even gives Jewel a flower on her head. That's a pretty romantic thing for two friends to do, right? And especially where one of them has a husband and children, huh? And look at this shot. That was pretty brutal to animate. Later on, Roberto tells Jewel that she and the family are welcome to stay in this tree. Blue is obviously hesitant about this, but Jewel is totally on board. I would like to say that Roberto is letting them stay out of the kindness of his heart. After all, he doesn't really ask Jewel for anything in return, but it's this scene that makes me think otherwise.
Blue, let me tell you something. If anything, and I mean anything, ever happens to you, I will take care of your family. Alright, buddy, sleep well.
One could say that he was probably joking when he says this, but I have no idea. It's just kind of weird for you to say this to someone who is married to your childhood best friend. So, I don't know. Who am I to judge? Either way, Blue was uncomfortable with Roberto, and I personally don't blame him, because I'm pretty sure Roberto is being quite flirty and too comfortable with Jewel. And even though I did say I was going to criticize Jewel on this, even though I feel like she could have at least wondered what happened to Blue during the dance scene, and at least take his feelings to an account here, I will also at least give her the benefit of the doubt, because looking at these scenes back to back, it's more on Roberto's part that needed to really control himself around Jewel. But again, Jewel did have some sort of say in this where she could have considered Blue's feelings during these scenes. Which, to be fair, she also kind of did during the dance scene where she asked Blue to come along and join them. But it was only for that one time, and if I were her, I would have wondered why Blue never came up during the entire song. So that whole thing was a mess, but let's go to this scene now. So I will say that this little moment is pretty sweet, and especially Jewel's gorgeous singing actually. Can't blame the kid for wanting her to sing again. Anyway, the main thing I want to bring up is the scene between her and Blue where she says that
I never let myself hope that they were alive, but but they are.
She is clearly really happy to see her family is alive after all those years spent alone. Mind you, she pretty much had no one before, and she was confined in a solitary place all alone right after her species was completely wiped out. Or so she thought for the longest time. Then she says this changes everything, which makes Blue go to a panic. While I now understand Jules' joy in finding her old family again, Blue is still scared of having his whole world change, especially in a world where he had no idea how to behave in. Okay, let's go to the scene where Eduardo trains Blue. Eduardo is the name of Jules' dad, by the way, in case I didn't make that clear. Eduardo makes Blue go through all these activities that he will need to train for in order to survive and thrive in the jungle. Obviously, him being a pet, he ain't doing so good at all, but this isn't revealed to Eduardo until after the training, when the two of them find men too close to the forest. Blue mentions Linda as the person who raised him to Eduardo. This explains everything as to why Blue acts so human, because he was raised by one as a pet. Here's the thing, I understand both these two. I already explained why the wildlife is hard for Blue to adjust to, but Eduardo was clearly reacting out of a survival instinct. His entire forest was burnt down because of humans, so it's only natural for him to be wary of humans, because let's be real here, humans are pretty monstrous. If I was an animal, I would stay away from us too. But I feel Eduardo should try to understand Blue and where he is coming from, because it's not like he chose to be a pet. Like I keep mentioning, Blue has no idea how to behave in the wild. He's domesticated, but he now knows the dangers that can arise in the Amazon. So obviously the thought of predators and overall forest life, it's understandably scary for him, but at least he tries, and that's what's admirable about him. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. Look, I know I've been fast forwarding a lot, but I just really want to hit the main beats of the story, so apologies if you can't keep up. Blue found out where Tulio and Linda are and goes to tell Jewel, and she says, will you stop thinking about Linda and Tulio and just enjoy the sunset? She isn't listening to Blue at this moment and is ignoring Blue's wants, but I also feel like even though Blue said that that was their original plan, at this point Jewel does not know that Blue is not feeling at home, which is another thing that will be discussed later, but she just wants to spend time with her family as of right now. Something I feel that she feels Blue could need to relieve the stress. Next morning, he flies out to find a Brazil nut for Jewel to surprise her for breakfast. Unfortunately, he finds himself in the red macaw's territory, which upsets them due to an agreement of the two bird species had that they are to never cross each other's territories. So when Eduardo finds out, obviously he's upset. But hey, at least Jewel found it sweet that Blue was getting a nut for her. I'm reading through the script and I just realized that that sentence sounded kind of weird. Anyway, so now for the soccer scene. This is where the two sides settle with a soccer game, where the winner gets control of the nut trees. Eduardo advises Blue to stay out of this, but the Blue keeps insisting he does. Eventually, Eduardo lets him play, and unfortunately, Blue shoots in the wrong goal and makes the Blue team lose. Let's go to Eduardo's reaction.
Oh! I'm gonna kill you, fanny pack!
So this is where the big scene happens. The scene that made me dislike Jewel. But now that I rewatched the movie, after considering both sides of the two birds, let's see if that opinion still stands. So, Jewel goes to Blue and asks what went wrong, which in my opinion probably isn't the best question to ask. I mean, girl, you just saw what happened, you were there. Wait to rub it in deeper. So anyways, Blue tells her that he was trying to be one with the tribe, but clearly it wasn't working out. He then tells her that he wants to go home, to which Jewel says that maybe the Amazon is home, and Blue then says that this isn't home for him. Everything he's tried has always gone wrong, and yeah, he's right. His own father-in-law doesn't accept him, and now the entire jungle won't either. Then Jewel says the line that I do not like at all, and what made me dislike her when I first watched this movie.
You know what? You need to figure out what you want, and maybe stop thinking about just yourself and start thinking about us.
Excuse me? Stop thinking about himself. All he did ever since he got here was think about you. He tried to join along in the forest dance despite not knowing how to, and being alone while you dance with Roberto. Learn from your dad how to be one with the tribe, and even tried to play in the Blue team during the soccer game. All of this was to prove to everyone that he belongs here, for you, so he can feel confident enough to stay here for you. Obviously, you can see that I still don't like this moment. Jewel completely undermines how Blue is feeling and calls him selfish when that couldn't be further from the truth. However, despite this scene existing and making Jewel kind of unlikable in this moment, this isn't the actual original scene that was supposed to play out. May I present to you the deleted scene? It is from a storyboard and no voice actors accompany it, so enjoy me reenacting this scene with my voice. Ahem. The kids will come around. I want to go home. Blue, maybe this place is home. Home? For who? Well, for us. Maybe this is where we belong. Well, I don't. I've been trying so hard, Jewel. I can't do it anymore. Can't do what? The kids are having an amazing time. You call mosquitoes, mud, and getting eaten alive amazing? I'm not like the tribe. I'm not wild. I'm me. Blue from Minnesota. And I'm ready to go back to Rio. Blue, this is where our family is. Your family? My family is your family. Well, it sure doesn't feel that way. Fine, if you like Rio so much, why don't you just go back without us? I thought I was your one and only, but I guess I was just the only one. Where's my Oscar, am I right? Anyway, the reason I present to you with this deleted scene is to show my initial reaction to it, which I saw before I rewatched Rio 2. I initially thought that this scene was much better than the scene we got, and I still somewhat do to some degree. That's only because it's the fact that right after Jewel said, "Why don't you go home without us?" and when Blue says, "I thought I was your one and only, but I guess I was just the only one." It brought something new to the table that I felt this movie could have had a chance to really get into when it comes to Blue's struggle throughout the movie, specifically him and Jewel's relationship and how he viewed it, and his insecurities that might have arose during it, especially after the events of this movie. The line could have suggested that he might have thought, did they only get together because they were the only other blue macaws around? Or he felt that he was unworthy of Jewel, and this worry he might have been proven with what Jewel had just said here. Overall, I felt it highlighted Blue's insecurities even more so than it's initially presented in the original scene. As for Jewel, the fact that she even regretted saying that to Blue just shows that she is remorseful immediately right after she said something cruel to him. Because in the original scene, yeah, she calls him selfish and she doesn't feel regretful or remorseful in this moment right after she says that. Or so I thought. Here's the thing, we already acknowledge who Jewel is as a character. She had a really big distrust of humans. Let us review what made her like this. Her forest was burned by humans, which separated her from her father, along with killing many bluebirds as a result. She was separated from her father and her tribe for the longest time, and eventually taken to a research facility. A place where, even though you can have good intentions, at the end of the day, Jewel is still a wild bird. There was no place for an animal like her, for she deserved to be out in the wild, roaming free. When she is eventually found by Blue, of course she cares for him, of course she is grateful for him, of course she would fall for him after still standing by her even after the rocky moments. How could she not? But while she still loves Blue, she also felt alone still, knowing that her and her newfound family are the only ones in her species that are left. So of course she would be happy to find them again. Of course she would be emotional in reuniting with not just her species, but with her dad that she thought was dead. Yes, she was neglectful of Blue's feelings to a point, which can be especially damaging to his worth considering him being a domesticated animal. Something we already understood about Blue. But we, and even me, of course, didn't understand about Jewel and her feelings throughout this entire situation. Blue is of course valid in his emotions, especially all the crap that everybody has been putting him through throughout the movie. But so is Jewel. And even though she was wrong in neglecting Blue's feelings and not understanding where he's coming from, that doesn't mean she doesn't care. Because right after Blue leaves, we see Jewel. She watches him fly away. And look at the look on her face. She probably realizes how hurtful her words were. What had she done? She wanted to stay with her family after too long, and she deserves to feel that way after everything she's been through. Maybe she got carried away, and instead, she probably lost her new family, her family and Blue. He was not selfish. Why did she suggest that? And now she'll probably lose him forever. the bird that saved her, the bird she loved. When we see Blue, who found Linda in Tulio's camp, this is where he realizes that even if the wild is not for him, and he is still scared, he chooses Jewel in the end, just like he did in the first movie, because he loves her. He can't leave her. They are chained together birds after all. However, before he could return to Jewel, he sees the destruction of the forest, run by none other than humans. It is here where I bet Blue realizes just how evil humans can be. They were destroying the forest just as if they did with Jewel and her forest when she was younger. No wonder everyone here is scared of humans. Especially Jewel. Especially Eduardo. Back at the forest, Roberto alerts everyone that the humans are coming, and that Blue is with them, but he's trying to help them, saying that he is on the bird's side still. Eduardo tells everyone to evacuate, but it is here where Jewel refuses. She says, not this time, despite her father's warning. She can't leave Blue behind, for he is her family too, she tells her dad. And Blue clearly heard their conversation, since not only is he right behind them, but he also responded after she hears Jewel telling her father off. Yeah, there might not be a sorry when they reunite, but they do touch beaks, signifying that they stick together no matter what, and that there are no longer hard feelings. Yes, what Jewel said was wrong, but since it was clear that Blue definitely heard that Jewel is standing up to her father in order to retrieve him, was enough for him to know that Jewel was sorry and is sticking by him this time, and that's never going to change. So the movie ends with the birds stopping the loggers, Nigel gets defeated, I guess, and they end with the Amazon Untamed song. Plus, Jewel tells Blue that she is cool if they spend their summers in Rio.
Maybe we can do summers in Rio. You're my one and only, Jewel. Aww.
The end. Overall, what do I think about this movie after this rewatch? Do I still think Jewel is a bad character and a wife to Blue? Do I still think that she is the worst part of this movie? Do I still think that this movie is mid overall? Well, no. To all those questions, that is. I feel as though, since I am older now, I feel I am better at understanding characters in their thought processes and or motivations. So I feel I was able to make a case for Jewel and seeing that, yes, she is a flawed character, but so is Blue. They both are, but it doesn't make them incompatible with each other. I feel that they very much enjoy each other's company after getting to know each other, and they support and understand each other no matter the circumstances. Rio 2 isn't a perfect movie though. Like I said, I didn't like Nigel returning to this movie. He really wasn't needed, especially because we have the loggers, and I guess Eduardo serves as, not as a villain obviously, or even an antagonist I don't think, but as a challenge for Blue. So Nigel was definitely unneeded. I also didn't care much for Linda and Tulio in this movie. I know finding them was Blue's initial goal, but they really didn't do it for me in this movie. I don't hate them, especially not Linda, just didn't care too much for them, and their scenes were definitely the weakest in this movie. Other scenes I didn't like, the audition scene, while bothered me way more as a kid because I found it disturbing when the animals started eating each other. Nowadays, I just hated the part where Nigel sang the cover of I Will Survive, which was not a good cover at all, and like I said, I don't like Nigel. Jewel, however, is no longer on the list of the bad things or even mid things that this movie has to offer. Now that she isn't, I will bump this movie's score from a 5 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10. It was surprisingly decent on rewatch, so forgive me, Jewel, for giving you a hard time before, but as of now, I guess you could say I've changed my ways. Thank you all for watching. I know you were all excited to hear my thoughts about Rio 2 and probably even expected me to bash Rio 2. Though I kind of want to change my answer to that question I was asked in my Q&A, I still hope that you can find some enjoyment in this video, even though I ended up not hating it as much as I initially did. But then you might be asking, what movie now takes the place for a movie I don't like but others do? Well, I guess only time will tell. I really don't have an answer. I think at the time when I made that video, since I didn't really care much for Rio and my dislike for Jewel was the only thing I remembered, was probably why I answered as such. So obviously, since I changed my mind now, it is no longer the answer to that age-old question. So for now, I don't have one, but I'll sure as hell let you know when I do think of something. In the meantime, tell me what you guys thought about the Rio movies. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Tell me what you think. And if you were like me where I didn't care about Rio 2, specifically Jewel as a character, and if this video somehow made you change your mind on that opinion, let me know too. And if you didn't, well, obviously that's cool too. But do not hesitate to tell me why. Like always, I really like seeing what you guys have to say, so go ahead and type away. Anyways, that'll be it for this video. The winged unicorn has to fly away now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!